There are a lot of methodologies that can get you to extremely high levels of financial independence and financial freedom. Some of the most common methods of wealth building include investing and entrepreneurship. Of course, you could always become a professional athlete. One thing is almost certain, and that is that most people would not think of professional poker as a means to build a net worth that surpassed 9 digits. Well, Dan Bilzerian has a current net worth of $200 million. Dan is probably best known as a high roller on the professional poker circuit. However, he does other things to generate revenue. Okay, let's start at the beginning. This is not one of those stories in which a person started off dirt poor and built an empire. As it turns out, Bilzerian's father, Paul Bilzerian, a corporate takeover specialist, contributed heavily to Dan's start in building his wealth. The elder Bilzerian left both of his sons hefty trust funds to get them started in life. Here is something that I bet Dan Bilzerian's fans are unaware of. After high school, Dan enlisted in the Navy and eventually began Navy SEAL training, but a dispute with a superior officer ended his career in the military. A native of Tampa, Bilzerian was exposed to the excitement of South Florida, and that drove his thirst for wealth even more. While it is obvious that Dan has earned a substantial amount of his net worth of $200 million by playing high-stakes poker, poker is not his only passion. Dan is a thrill seeker, which led him to become a professional stuntman. Bilzerian not only plays poker himself, but he also sponsors other poker players. In 2013, Dan sponsored his friend and fellow poker player, Jay Farber, with $2,000 to enter an event. Farber ended up placing second in the event. He gave Dan $1 million of his winning. Now that is what you call a serious return on investment. Speaking of return on investment, Dan has a number of holdings in his investment portfolio that work to solidify his long-term financial stability. One thing that fame and popularity bring with it is the fact that there will always be those who serve to counterbalance the energy of your fans. Dan is no exception to this rule. There are some, especially certain poker analysts, who refer to Dan as a fraud. Dan has developed a reputation as a genius when it comes to playing poker. Some of the hate comes from the rumors that most of Dan's wealth is not from his own work, but from the hands of his disgraced father. Paul Bilzerian spent time in prison for securities fraud, which is actually more common than most people realize. It is still not a good look when it comes to creating credibility. Dan has built his reputation as one of the faces of high-stakes professional poker through a bad boy image that he pushes to the edge every chance he gets. Dan has a tendency to make some rather lofty claims that do not sit well with the upper echelon of poker, if there is such a thing. Well, I guess every situation has rules of conduct and engagement, even poker. Dan has made claims that he has put up almost his entire net worth in a poker game before, a statement that certain poker analysts refer to as being totally ludicrous. One analyst in particular, Doug Polk, claims to have poked holes in this story, and others associated with Dan Bilzerian. Polk claims that there was a lot of money missing when Bilzerian's father was convicted and forced to pay close to $60 million in fines. The elder Bilzerian only paid a few million of that, and the rest of the money is unaccounted for. This has led some to speculate that Paul Bilzerian used his two sons' trust fund to cipher and laundered money to keep from paying the full fine. As bad as Polk loves to disprove Dan, he stops short of saying that is the poker genius that he claims to be, but still has to admit that he is a good poker player. At the end of the day, it is obvious that Dan has earned a substantial amount of his net worth from playing poker and being a stuntman, but there is still a large amount of his wealth that cannot be explained. It seems that Bilzerian is still up to his regular ways. While his net worth hasn't shown any signs of change, his Instagram and Twitter accounts continue to climb in followers, and Bilzerian is still pushing his lady and gun lifestyle. However, most of the news that's come out about him so far this year has involved his poker lifestyle and some new products he's pushing. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.